carrying shame is a very, very strong indicator of a relapse risk. Right? Because it's a very uncomfortable emotion. Like nobody enjoys feeling shame. It has the potential to lead somebody down the path of a relapse to not feel the shame. So learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to give yourself grace is so important when it comes to recovery. Recovery even from trauma, right? People will find themselves, in a trauma response, right? Beating themselves up now, falling back into people-pleasing patterns, right? And then they'll start down this path of shaming themselves, and they're right back to where they were, right? This and grace is a beautiful thing.
Namaste. I am so excited about today's interview, even though I haven't even conducted it yet. I just know it's going to be amazing because I'm introducing you to a fellow Michiganian. And I don't say Michigander. I always say Michiganian. So our guest today, she is an amazing woman. She is a trailblazing psychic medium, soul healer, spiritual advisor, high priestess, Reiki master, author, podcast and radio show host, and recovering alcoholic. And she is known as the pink-haired sober witch. And her name is Sunshine Witchski. And her mission is to help witches in recovery rediscover their magic, align with their highest purpose, and live the abundant life promised in sobriety. And yeah, we're going to be talking about all of that and more, I'm sure. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring her right up on the stage right now. So, hello, Sunshine.
Hi, Gloria. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am delighted to have you on. And there's so many things. I'm not even sure where I want to start because there's so many things I want to talk to you about because I just think you're an amazing person already, just from what little I've known about you. So I guess, where should we start? I think, I want to talk about addiction and recovery. But I also, before we get there, I think I want to just start a little lighter possibly and just delve into magic and that aspect of you, because I'm intrigued. I'm a bit of a woo-woo person myself. I'm not a Reiki master, but I have studied Reiki, and I do something I share called light language. So how did your journey enable you to, I guess, especially now that you are pink-haired, and I know we're going to deal about the sober part of you in a minute too, but I'm just curious about, what does magic mean to you? Maybe we'll start with that. Yeah, what does magic mean to you? Let's do that.
What does magic mean to me? I believe that magic is our ability to, work with the energies that surround us, right? Work with those energies to manifest, to change, to transform, to bring about the things in our life that we either need or desire, right? Magic is this literal, setting of an intention and seeing it come into life. And, a lot of people, I think when they think of magic, some people think of it as the sleight of hand, pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Right. And, sure, that is a form of magic, but magic with a K in the occult and the esoteric space is this, being able to manifest or bring about change, through, and I hesitate to use the word manipulation of energies, but by using the energies that kind of surround situations. And there's all sorts of various different ways to do this. But even from a very simplistic point of view, a prayer is a form of magic. An affirmation is a form of magic. A mantra is a form of magic, right? Anybody that's ever read The Secret or books on the law of attraction, this is magic, right? So hopefully that answers and shares.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, because it really is. Um, yeah, it's all of that. And I have a friend of mine likes to say this too, is that, you know, our words are really powerful,
Mhm.
and they cast spells, which is why they call it spelling. And it's
Yep.
like, yeah, because they reflect our beliefs, and sometimes our unconscious beliefs, and so you really have to be mindful about what you say, and because it really can have an effect on you. So now that we know a little bit about magic, how did the term sober witch come about? Because I understand you've got a story that
Mhm.
is behind that you went through a while ago. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I always like to share too how I define a witch. I
Mm.
think it's really important because I do think that's a term, and I claim it very intentionally. I claim
Mm.
it because it can have a negative connotation in a lot
That's
of.
true.
It has been
Yeah,
used against women for centuries, right?
absolutely.
So
Hmm.
I have reclaimed it to take the power back that it has. And so for me, a witch is an individual that believes in and practices the psychic arts, believes in and practices magic, as well as understands that we are here to be of service to the world. And that being of service to the world is not, could be as simple as being a mother or a father that is raising children, raising really good, beautiful human beings,
Hmm.
or as grand as somebody that is, starting a nonprofit to, bring about some major, healing into the world, like whatever
Hmm.
it may be.
Right.
And so, I've identified as a witch since I was 16,
Mm.
right? I was raised Catholic,
Me too.
13 years of Catholic school,
Oh,
right?
more than me. I only had four.
Oh, no, 13 whole years, and I always kind of, like, joke with some people that it was training for the witch in me, right? It's very
Mm.
ritualistic, it's very,
Yeah.
yes, it has, its own faith and belief, but a lot of the practices are very witch-like, right? Um, and so, I had always had that magic component. I'd
Yeah.
always been, kind of a helper as a child, so to speak. But it was around the age of 16 years old when I walked into a metaphysical store for the first time, and I
Mm.
ended up buying my own tarot deck. That was when
Mm.
I first kind of initiated into the psychic arts. And so ever since I was 16 years old, I've practiced all three of those things in one way, shape, or form.
Mm.
But I've done it in what I like to consider a reactive fashion,
Mm.
right? Somebody asked me to pull tarot cards or had a
Mm.
question, or I had a situation in my life that needed magic, right? I wasn't using it as a spiritual path per se. I was using it as a practice and a tool set.
Mm.
And so it wasn't until I hit my rock bottom in 2019, admitted for the first time, not just to my therapist, but really to my friends and my family around me, that I was an alcoholic,
Mm.
that I stepped into my path of recovery. And in that path of recovery, realized I needed something more to keep me on that path. And it needed to be anchored in my spiritual beliefs.
Mm.
And so that, in essence, it took me a while before I still, said sober witch, but that is what it was. Like I started to say, what do I believe in? What practices do I have? How can I, quote unquote, go to church every week? How can I anchor myself in a spiritual practice that doesn't just happen like on the occasional holiday, like we
Yeah.
often did as a child, as a Catholic, but it was ingrained in my every single waking day. How could
Mm.
I do that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where the sober witch came about.
Yeah. That's amazing. I yeah, that's it's good to know. And I now you can let me know if this is okay to ask you, but what what prompted that, realization then that you needed to be able to, you were on a path that wasn't working for you anymore and you
Mm.
needed to get sober.
I've done a lot of reflection of this, and what I would have answered, back when I first hit my rock bottom versus a year out versus like now is probably very different. I started in my, I would say, early 30s questioning my relationship with alcohol, right?
Mm.
Um, and not on like a daily or a regular basis, but the reality is we hit a certain age in life, alcohol affects us differently, the hangovers become more extreme. I was trying to rise the ranks of my corporate job at that point, so showing up with a hangover was not a wise idea. So I really started to question my relationship with alcohol at that time, and I started to try to moderate. And for anybody that has ever, kind of been in this dance or relationship with, how they feel about their consumption of alcohol, almost everyone I've ever talked to has tried to moderate, right? And this is, I'm only going to drink on the weekends. I'm only going to have 2 drinks when I do. I'm only going to drink wine. I'm only going to drink at the house. I'll only drink one beverage when I'm out at dinner with friends. Like all of these kind of situations that we would create to try to keep our drinking in some kind of box or container. And the truth is it may have worked for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 months. I mean, there was a year in my 30s that I gave up drinking for Lent,
Mm.
right? Um, but it never stuck. And so I found myself in 2017, in the fall of 2017, and my father, who is an alcoholic, was on his deathbed, and it was from drinking. He basically drank himself to the point that his heart was now operating at 6%, his liver and his kidneys were shutting down, and he was facing the decision to move forward with either hospice or to undergo a majorly invasive surgery called an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device being implanted into his heart to pump his blood. And I had to take a 2.5 month leave of absence. And that, from that point forward, watching what he had done to himself, seeing what he did, had me really questioning, now just not being curious about my relationship with alcohol, but seeing I did not want to be in this same place as him.
Mm.
At that same time, I had a cousin that, unbeknownst to us, was also severely struggling. And by a whole year after that, found himself on his deathbed.
Oh my.
And that cousin was a year younger than me.
Oh. Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's a big
So
call.
I have all of these examples of what alcohol can do to the physical body, right? And now, as I've looked back, I had a lot of trauma and childhood abuse that showed what it can do to the spiritual body and the emotional body,
Hmm.
right? And so I think I had been chasing for relief from this addiction for a good portion of my adult life, for probably about almost probably my entire 30s, if not even into my 20s. Um, and so it wasn't until in 2019, after watching my father almost die, my cousin now on his deathbed, uh, I finally said, I'm gonna try to stop. I'm gonna try to stop. And I relapsed twice that year.
Mm.
I still relapsed twice that year, even because it's a gnarly beast. I mean, it's had its claws in me in ways that I didn't even realize at that time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And and I suspect, just in hearing how you described it, is that might have been your same mindset as you said you tried to stop. You
Hmm.
tried
Hmm.
instead of saying I'm gonna stop or I am stopping. And so
Yeah.
that may have been subconsciously, playing into it too. Because I've had my own um, my drug of choice has been food my whole life because I also had an alcoholic dad. And then my mom was also with the food, I think, as her way of coping. And so it, uh, it has taken me a long time, and I'm still, I think, a recovering person. I've done better this last almost maybe a year and a half now.
Mhm.
But it's as they say, what came was OA, because I found after my mom had passed, she had a whole bunch of books from Overeaters Anonymous, but I know it's the same
Mhm.
AA, one day at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and I know that program does a lot of spiritual. It has a spiritual bent to it, but and I don't know if that's been your journey, or maybe you've done your own type of spiritual
Mm.
journey. So how how has that been for you, and how do you think? Well, I guess let me phrase it a different way. If there's someone out there, you know, and I listening to this today who's going through any type of addiction, we'll get more into that too, because there's, as I said, there's alcohol, there's certainly food, there's all other things we can be addicted to. What would you, what kind of words of encouragement, I guess, would you have for someone um, to maybe they feel like they they would like to change their behavior? I'm going to say it that way.
Hmm.
Yeah. What would you?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of words of encouragement, and the first thing I would say is like, good for you, right? Good for you, like amazing, like having that want and that desire is the first thing, right?
Mm,
Even if you were to be in a 12-step program, they'll say the only thing that you have to do to go into a 12-step program is has the desire to stop drinking or stop abusing food or stop, whatever these things are, just the desire. You don't even have to not do it. You just have to have the desire. So if you are considering it or have a desire to change your relationship with whatever type of addictive, pattern or behavior, like good for you. That is amazing. That is an incredible. And I'm really proud of you. Right now, the desire is the very first kind of requirement. The next thing is be willing to change. Just because you have the desire, you have to also be willing to change. And when it comes to facing addiction specifically, this could be changing your entire life. This could be changing who you associate with, who you talk to, how do you talk to yourself, how you show up in the world, um, your relationships, your place of employment. Like, be willing to change and be willing to face any fears that you have around change, right? Because the definition of insanity, as they say, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? You have
yeah.
to be willing. You have to have the desire, and then you have to be willing to take the changes and put them into play. And you were kind of mentioning there, Gloria, like about, I stepped into a 12-step program to start, after that
Mm,
second relapse, I did. And I think the number one thing that 12-step program taught me um, was that it is a spiritual journey to get yourself out of it, right? Now, as a lot of people will tell you, that 12-step program typically tends to have a very Christian type of
yeah.
bend to it.
Right.
It's because that's the predominant religion in throughout most of the United States, and
Mm,
therefore that's just how it is.
yeah.
But there are a lot of other programs that are out there. There is a Dharma recovery that is available. So if that
Mm,
happens to be your thing, you're Buddhist, you lean into the Buddhist path, check
mm,
that out. There are agnostic, right, or secular type of meetings when it comes to the AA. So you could
right.
check that out. There's one that is aligned around dialectical behavior therapy, which is just the kind of the therapist approach, which is called
Mm,
Smart Recovery.
mm,
If you are, indigenous, there is one specifically for folks within the indigenous communities. And as far as me, I have created my own movement, which is called the Sober Witch Life movement for
mm,
folks that are practicing magic, are practicing the divination arts, and truly align themselves with that as their spiritual path. So that's the other thing. If you are willing to change, now find the community that you can lean into in order to do that change, to help you with that change. They're not going to change you, they're not going to do
mm,
it for you, right? But
right.
they will be there to support you as you navigate it, because it can be really scary to do it alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because yeah, because that's the important thing. You start with the desire, then you have to be willing and then get support. because to try
Mhm.
to do it on your own is a recipe for frustration, because you can be successful for a long time, and I've done it, and it's easier when you've got a community,
Yeah.
or even just one other person, but
Yeah.
somebody else that you can lean on, when the going gets tough, because it does. We're humans, stuff happens.
Yeah.
Have you found um, that it is sometimes, do you feel ever like, you're taking, one step forward, two steps back, and
Mm.
and then and not necessarily probably relapsing totally, because I'm sure because I know with alcohol you really do need to be, I think, much
Yeah,
more
the food the
of,
f the food
not drinking.
Yeah, the food addiction thing, you're spot on, right? Like
Yeah.
I have a history of it of a long time ago. It doesn't get me as much. I've definitely changed my relationship with food and how I approach that. But it's interesting. I do lead what I refer to as the recovery covenant. I have a lot of conversations around kind of my experience,
Mm.
and you're making me think about something I was sharing recently where, when I was in early recovery, it kind of came in these big, like these quick waves,
Mm.
where I would feel like it was a little bit dangerous. I was kind of walking on thin ice, so to
Mhm.
speak. The emotions were at the surface type stuff. But I didn't have a whole bunch of tools at that particular time. I didn't have a lot of tools to help me navigate if I had an overwhelmed nervous system, if I was triggered, something had happened. I didn't have a lot of tools in early recovery. So it felt a lot more dangerous at that particular time, and there was probably more of a risk of a potential relapse. I mean, for my first year I relapsed twice, right? I didn't have community at that time, though. I didn't have the support I needed. But nowadays I like to say that those waves come far and few between, and even when they do come, they're like little bumps, right?
Mhm.
They're not big gigantic tidal waves that could knock me over. They're just little bumps, and I've learned how to like kind of ride that surfboard and understand, like, I'm okay. This too shall pass, right? It's not going to
Mhm.
be like this the entire time. And frankly, I am human. So even if I did mess up, and because it's not just alcohol. Like I state that I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. I also am recognizing I'm recovering from childhood abuse,
Mhm.
an emotionally abusive husband. There's all sorts of
Mhm.
things, and
Right.
so every now and again, my thing that I tend to relapse on that catches me off guard is my workaholism.
Ah, interesting.
So I will realize I've been keeping myself so busy that I
Mm.
haven't allowed myself time, just like the beautiful opportunity to just sit and connect with the divine,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like that one will catch me often. And I'm like, how did this even happen? Right.
Mhm.
And I go back to that childhood trauma. I learned at a very, very young age that if I keep myself busy,
Mhm.
I'm less likely to get in trouble.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about that, and which I've learned to do for myself, is to just forgive myself.
Hmm.
Give myself grace. Okay, yeah, you indulge today. Okay, it's not the end of the world. And also my body starts to let me know, and in ways that is like, oh yeah, I feel that pain now. Okay, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'll treat you better now.
Hmm.
and 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 that's okay, because we're human, and we're gonna mess up sometimes. But as long as we keep remembering and knowing that we can start over again anytime. I had a wonderful counselor I was working with for a while who said that, you can just start over now. You don't have to wait till tomorrow. You can start right in this moment and just say, okay, I'm going to make better choices right now.
Hmm.
Simple as that.
Yeah, and I love that you call out the grace, and it's so important to have the grace and to have the forgiveness of self because, and I was just writing earlier today about it. Um, Carrying shame
Mm.
is a very, very strong indicator of a relapse risk.
Yeah.
right? Because it's a very uncomfortable emotion. Like
Mhm.
nobody enjoys feeling shame,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no joy in that at all. There's no delight. I mean, even individuals, you know, yeah, it just does. So it has the potential to lead somebody down the path of a relapse to
Yeah.
not feel the shame. So
Yeah.
learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to give yourself grace is so important when it comes to recovery. And we're talking about addiction, but
Yeah.
recovery even from trauma, right?
Mhm.
People will
For
find
sure.
themselves, in a trauma response, right?
Mhm.
Beating themselves up now, falling back into people pleasing patterns, right?
Right.
And then they'll start down this path of shaming themselves and
Yeah.
they're right back to where they were, right?
Absolutely.
Forgiveness and grace is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And that's why I do think working with someone, either a coach or working in a community, can be so helpful because we often don't even realize it. We say things and uh, we don't hear it. We don't hear ourselves speak. And I know I've talked about this in one of my solo episodes just recently, that I was working with a coach one time, and she stopped me when I was talking. She's like, did you hear what you just said? And I was like, no, what did I say? And then she, repeated back to me, and it was like I was like beating myself up over something. And I was like, oh wow, no, I didn't realize it. So that's where, having someone else in your corner can be so helpful in pointing out the things that we're not even aware of.
I love that. That's something I often do. Is just that reframe and that perspective shift with folks. And I want to make sure to state this out loud. There is a huge benefit in working with a coach, or somebody that has the skill and the experience behind them to help navigate this stuff versus just leaning on a friend. Your friends are lovely, they're wonderful, and they're going to be able to support you, but our friends aren't always willing to speak up. They're not always practiced in the art of shifting a narrative, right? Some of your friends may be, but a lot of times our friendships tend to fall into really good bitch sessions rather than coaching sessions. So finding somebody that you can trust that can be a coach, a mentor, a guide, right, can be really important when it comes to navigating any major transition or shift in your life. We're talking about addiction and recovery from like addiction here, but if you wanted to go through any major transition, changing a job, moving into retirement. My mom, bless her, she's 74 and just retired. And like I'm just thinking like, my, would it be a wonderful thing if she had a coach to kind of navigate her through that life transition, right?
Hmm.
Thankfully, she has a therapist, but yeah, yeah. But it's true. It's just,
Yeah.
we've had some conversations, and she's like, it gets this anxiousness and this nervousness, and I'm like, all you need is somebody to like talk you through, and
Yeah.
listen to like it, and allow you to recognize there are other opportunities.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I love friends. I love friends. I love
Yeah,
really
they're
healthy,
great.
wonderful friends. Yeah,
Yes.
but a coach, a mentor, a guide, somebody that has the experience, is really invaluable.
Absolutely, because they have objectivity. Your friends, love you. Let's hope, and they want the best for you, but they may not always understand that sometimes the best for you is them giving you a little tough love, and that's
Hmm.
where someone who you pay can do that because
Yeah,
it's just
and
it's just the way it is. It kind of works out better. Yeah.
and it's I'll share from an individual that is a coach, and Gloria, I don't even, maybe you feel this way sometimes. I have some friends where I do end up even falling into the coach type of role with, and it's
Yeah.
awkward. It's a
Yeah.
little bit uncomfortable because I'm like, I can't. So I have this rule that I will keep my mouth shut until spirit kind of like pokes me 3 times. And so it
Like,
happened to me yesterday. A dear friend of mine said something, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole." And then next thing you knew, I'm like getting the poke, and I'm like, "Really, I do not want to say this." And I got the third poke, and I was like, "All right,
okay.
well, I guess it's my place." Thankfully, it was very well received, very, very well received, and they were appreciative of it. But it can be it could potentially rifle a
Yeah.
friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But I like that waiting for 3 times, and I
Mm.
think the reason then it universe, well, this is going to be my belief that the universe knew it was going to be well received. That's why I kept poking you. It's like we know she can handle it, or he, or whatever it was. This person could handle it. So it's just important for you to they needed you in that
Yeah.
moment.
I love that perspective. I have had a couple of folks too that do get rifled up, like, they get a little bit upset, but after they allow
Mhm.
themselves to settle, they'll come back
Sure.
around. But yeah,
Yeah.
being the friend that's providing that kind of mentorship is a little awkward and strange
Yeah.
too. So,
Absolutely. So, well, we're talking a little bit about healing too right now. So, how do you integrate magic, say, into daily healing practices?
hmm. I one of my biggest things, and I was just actually talking about this yesterday. We were talking about daily practices. I have a prayer that I wrote for myself over 6 years ago that I say on a daily basis. And that prayer in and of itself expresses gratitude. It asks for continued guidance and protection. Um, and it also offers prayer and intentions for those that are still out there, like, struggling with addiction, like, that are kind of suffering. And I believe that when we, anchor ourselves into some kind of daily ritual, right, it allows us the opportunity as well, right? So that prayer allows me this time to reflect. And then I do journal every day and I reflect upon kind of how my day is. So now my healing isn't, you heard me say earlier, reactive. Like, my magic or my practice isn't reactive. It's this daily consistent habit where, if I do check and I'm like, wow, I've been really anxious, which I have been, I've been feeling this anxiety these last couple of days. And so I now know, making sure to get my adequate amount of sleep, monitoring, are you drinking too much caffeine? Have you fed and nourishing and balancing foods into your body? So I'm able to heal and do a lot more practices from a healing perspective that are integrated into my day to day rather than having to find myself completely out of sorts, so to speak, and now clamoring to heal from the flu or heal from, a sprained ankle or anything of that nature. I'm much more consciously aware and in tune with what's going on daily rather than having to wake up, so to speak, one day and realize I'm sick.
Mm, that's good. Yeah, it's I like to say I have non-negotiable type of things that I do, and actually really my I would say, now that I think about it, I think my true non-negotiable is still just meditation. That's like my
Mhm.
one, because now that I'm thinking about my others that I had included in there, I've been negotiating with. I haven't been always journaling every day, and it's been cold in Florida recently, so I haven't even been going for my walk every morning that I usually like to do, even though I know it's good for me. But meditation for me, I've found, is that even if it's only 10 minutes,
Mm.
sometimes I could do a whole hour, which is lovely, but, you know, 10 minutes is fine. Just being quiet and spending time, and doing a little prayer and then just being still, that grounds me for the rest of the day, and I can
Yeah.
manage stuff. So I have to have, so whatever yours is out there that, you're listening to this, find that one, at least one thing that you can commit to, because you you deserve it. You deserve to spend that time with yourself, number one, and it will pay benefits down the road when you can come up
Yeah.
with something that is healing for you. And we're all
Yeah.
different, so you have to figure it out. You might have to try a few different things, and that's
Yep.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah. The most important thing there, I'll just say, is finding something that you enjoy and that you can be consistent with.
yeah, yeah,
Right? And so, I if you don't enjoy, an hour of meditation, right,
yeah.
sitting in silence every day, don't try to do it,
Right.
right? Don't force yourself. Maybe you enjoy, humming and singing and saying prayer while you're doing the dishes.
Hmm.
Maybe that's what you enjoy,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Uh, yeah.
go for it. And actually, humming and singing is very healthy for you. I mean,
Mhm.
not only emotionally, but I think they're proving it's really good for you physically as well. So we need to do more singing, and I love that anyway, and I need to do more of it myself. So it's so good. Um, if you decided to redesign your life today, design your life your way, would would you do anything different, or if would there
Mm.
be anything that you would change? And even because I know you're not quite in that midlife area yet. I think you still got. I suspect you still have a few more years. So maybe what do you see for yourself is down the road? Maybe like 10 years from now. Do you envision yourself doing anything different?
You know, there's one thing that I can say that has been a constant with me, and that is change. Like, especially as I've been in recovery, I've grown, I've changed, I've evolved. Even if I were to look before that, it's not been something that I really hesitated, and I do realize I'm lucky in that perspective. I don't have a fear of change. It may be uncomfortable, but I don't fear it.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there is this desire that I'd have, like if I were to kind of, redesign my life and look ahead, I'm 46, I'll be 47 later this year. Um, and I were to fast forward just 5 years from now, what might I like? I have really had this craving to desire more time to write. So I historically have spent a lot of time. I was in corporate up until about a year and a half ago. I've had corporate clients, like I've been a consultant outside of all of the other spiritual work to kind of, help me, survive, so to speak, right? Provide. And so I really would love to be in this place where my writing and where a lot of this other work with the nonprofit is able to just, provide enough support to give me the space to be able to just write, and to do that, wherever. Like the best thing I can imagine right now, I'm thinking about my partner and I were down in Tennessee a couple of years ago in this beautiful little cabin overlooking the mountains, and I remember just sitting there and writing a couple of chapters of the book and editing. And it was the most wonderful experience. That's what I would like to see more of in my life. Yeah.
Mm. Well, you've put it out there in the universe now, so that's the first step. So you've got
Mhm.
that desire, so
Mhm.
you can make it happen. You can make it happen. Briefly, because I think you touched on this earlier, but I'd love for you to just maybe say it again. So, what is your nonprofit about, real quick?
The Sovereign Phoenix is a spiritual fellowship that has been created, so a 501(c)(3) religious nonprofit,
Mm,
in order to support witches in recovery. So every single thing, all of the programming, all of my literature, all of my books, all of that go into the nonprofit to be able to offer the recovery circles, any of the course, kind of like the spiritual work that we do, the recovery coven as it stands. It has all sorts of amazing, social kind of events as well as spiritual development events in it. Yeah, so the nonprofit supports that. My hope is, right, that my vision includes at some point we will have 3 recovery circles every single day
mm,
available, right? As well as a legal fund that we can
mm,
tap into when people do find themselves in a position, um,
mm,
where, maybe their ability to practice their spiritual faith has been threatened.
mm.
Yeah. It's not
That's,
uncommon. People have lost their jobs because of being a practicing witch. They've
yeah.
been ostracized in communities. There's been challenges around having custody of their children. I've
Yeah,
heard
I
those
know that
stories.
that was my first thought. I was thinking legal fund might be something for that. So yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's such a shame that people don't take the time to find out about things. They just go with what's been in the zeitgeist or something, for years, but it's not what you see in the movies, necessarily, or
Hmm.
what on TV. It's a spiritual type of
Hmm.
practice. So it looks a little bit different, but but not exactly, as you mentioned, because I was raised Catholic as well, with like candles. There's lots of stuff in there, lots of different rituals that, in another time, someone else might have called that. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad you're doing that. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
If people want to find out more about you and yeah, because I know that you are an author as well, and what's the best place for people to learn everything about you?
I try to put everything up on the website soberwitch.life. So that has about the recovery coven, the book, the radio show. There is merchandise, there are articles, everything that I write, the podcast that I produce. All of that is fed directly onto that site. And then, if you are curious about this, the Sovereign Phoenix, there are links there so that you can learn and read more. But yeah, that's the easiest ones. And I know what you put on the screen. You can email me, sunshine@soberwitch.life too as well.
All right, perfect. Um, if people just take one thing from your message today, what do you hope that is?
The number one thing that I would like anyone to take is to find the connection and the support that you need in this world to navigate whatever it is, right? Whether this is a strong friend group, whether this is some kind of support group, whether it is your church or the community that you're connected with, but don't think that you have to navigate the difficulties in life alone. Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. And I'm just going to put in a quick little plug here for my group. So I have a group called the Soulful Women's Network, and it's geared especially for women over 50. And so if you want to check it out, I'll have the link in the show notes there. But I'd love to be able to support you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. This was amazing. I knew it was going to be, and I wish you all the best and good work that you're doing, and continue. Continue. And I think, you know what? Actually, now that I think about it, I want to say one last thing, and I think especially what I love about what you're doing is that you're supporting other people, and I think when you do support other people, it helps to keep you on that road.
Sure does.
As well, doesn't it?
That's what I tell people. I said, I'm super selfish. I'm doing all of this for my own recovery over here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. So see, it's all about, giving back when you are able to accomplish something, share it with somebody else and help them along, because we all need community. That's
that we do.
Even more than we have needed it. We even need it more lately. Just, show love one another, okay?
Yep.
That's my thing. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gloria. Yeah.
And I do want to thank all of you for listening and watching today, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. I hope that you will... I'm hitting the wrong button, but that's okay. I'll have you back on here. Sunshine, I was trying to do something else, but oh well. Anyway, just, make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform. All the links are down here as well on social media, so you can connect with me there. And until we meet again, just go out and make today great. And we'll see you next time.